Hey everyone, you're listening to Film Philosophy, where we break down the philosophies, concepts, and structures of filmmaking in the American film industry. We are filmmakers Tiffany Francis, Andrew Coles, and Nzinga Murray. Film Philosophy is brought to you by The Mission Entertainment. Today's episode features Ryan Alexander Holmes, and the topic that we are tackling is the complexity of intersectionality in media. Ryan Alexander Holmes is an actor and content creator based in Los Angeles, known for his strong presence on social media, where he uses comedy and writing to explore and embrace his mixed Chinese and African American heritage. We chose Ryan for this topic because through his work, he aims to inspire others of mixed backgrounds to embrace their identity and showcase the strength in multiculturalism. All right, so welcome, Ryan.
What's up, man? Man, that was so amazing. This is like NPR. I feel like I'm on NPR right now. Yeah.
Or some version of it.
Pleasure to be here.
We are very glad to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, so we're going to get into it. Ryan, first, can you define what you feel is intersectionality? And if you can, dissect the complexities of intersectionality in media. And do you feel like there are any examples of this throughout film history that you've seen? Loaded question.
Wow, no big deal. No big deal. Just put all the weight on my shoulders to answer for all the multiculturalism in this industry. I mean, there's good and there's bad. I think what I want to say first and foremost is the humanity of these people being represented, right? Because we see, sort of how culture can be treated as a trend. So how do we embrace the trend, because we like that, because we got culture, but also be accurate and showcase these people's true lives and what they truly go through, not for the sake of, Hollywood is a business, not for the sake of making money. We like making money, but to actually showcase their humanity and make money too. I think good examples of that are when, I really like Donald Glover. I really like Maya Erskine. She's mixed race like me. I'm Black and Chinese. She's Japanese and white. And letting them have the reins and creative control to create their own show, write their own show, act in it. That shows, I'm going to keep saying humanity, but it shows the humanity of these actual characters as opposed to someone outside of that culture trying to write like a character into their world without actually having any friends or knowing the culture themselves.
For sure. Well, go ahead, Andrew.
No, I was just going to say I'm curious to understand, a little bit when you talk about, some of these images or some of these examples that speak to you and sort of showcase, what our industry can do and what it can be a part of. I'm curious as to what it was like for you growing up, and whether there was a push and pull of identifying with one part of your heritage more than the other, or, feelings like you have to choose, or perhaps feelings of being, between two worlds, and, growing up, if there were any, images or characters or storylines that you felt really, resonated and shined a light into the experience, of you and your family.
Man, no, but there were things that came close, right? Because I'm Black, and specifically I'm Black and Chinese. I've never seen that on camera or on the silver screen or on a TV show. And that's sort of what motivates me to continue to share my story. But growing up, I mean, I still had a lot of culture in my life. I like to say that I came out as Asian like 4 years ago because I have a Puerto Rican exterior and people are very confused. But I think for so many years of my life, it had been like, well, okay, I'm Asian inside of my household, but the second I step foot outside of it, I'm whatever society says that I am, right? And then 4 years ago, COVID set a lot of artists free, because when there's no auditions and there's no creative mediums to outside of yourself to sort of like lean on for sustenance, you have to dive into your own personal experiences very deeply. And I think that's what happened to me. It's like, I can't deal with this anymore. Like, I'm tired of trying to pretend to be something else. And now I'm like face to face with it because I'm in my house by myself, no roommates, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's terrified of COVID. So I'm like, man, who am I? And I'm like, damn, I'm Black and Chinese. And I'm very Black and I'm very Chinese because I grew up in the Chinese community. Let me express that. And of course, there was so much fear and anxiety around how people would receive it. But I was talking to my brother a lot during COVID, which maybe he didn't want me to talk to him so much. He has a whole family. He has two daughters and a whole family. But he was like, okay, so when are you gonna stop like telling? When are you gonna like not just tell me this and then also tell the world this? Like, you went to drama school, you spent all that money, like make something, write something, show something. And I was like, yeah, but he's like, nah, no buts, man. Just like show it to somebody else because what you're saying is profound. Do you just want me to hear it? And so I started doing that. And like the first post that I wrote went viral because it was sort of, it was at the height of BLM and Stop Asian Hate. And then for me, I'm seeing both of them sort of like beef with each other. And so as a Black and Chinese person, I'm like, here's how I feel, And it's crazy how that really started my artistic journey, I think, in a very profound way because it was so personal. Whereas, I went to drama school, I'd been in TV shows and movies, but like that was sort of the understanding and the catalyst for me to like truly express myself as an artist. And also like it took a lot of courage because I'm doing something that I've never done before. And in a lot of ways I'm trailblazing this artistic path in a way that no one has done before. And I think that to me is a lot more valuable than trying to sort of fit the mold of what I think Marvel is, instead of being unique and then Marvel being like, we like this unique person, let's bring them on board. It's a completely different sort of understanding of self and completely different path on the way to finding success as an artist.
For sure. Do you feel like, or why did you feel afraid to express the Chinese part of yourself? I'm just curious. Like, what do you think
Oh
were
man.
like, yeah, like what was the fear that you were gonna face? What was gonna happen if you told people?
So people remember negativity. I mean, this is like true, I think, across the board and scientifically, is like people really remember the negative experiences they have over the positive. And I think I had been letting the negative, isolated, racist experiences that I experienced in my own community, in the Asian community, that were anti-Black, but they didn't speak for the whole community.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, you don't know that. You're just like, these kids calling me the N-word, this Chinese man talking shit to my grandma and my mom about me being Black. But they don't know that like that's my grandma and my mom. They just think that's some random Black kid roaming around the Chinese grocery store. So I look back and I'm like, man, like that was actually like the on the shorter end of the experience list. They just impacted
Mm-hmm.
me so hard. When I made that first post that went viral, I was having panic attacks and I was riddled with anxiety before I pressed post because in my mind, I was just at the end of my rope and I'm like, here's how I really feel. And this is what I'm just going to say. And I expected there to be mostly negative things. I expected it to be like being called monkey and the N word and people telling me to shut up and people telling me that I'm not really Asian and I don't know what it's like to be Asian and I'm not an Asian, But what happened was like 95% was support. And it blew my mind because it completely made me have to restructure my idea of what the Asian community actually was. Not this sort of imaginary ghoul that I had in my head, but like actual humans who are listening to another human talk about their experience that was very similar to theirs and actually supporting them. 5% though, that 5%, man, that was extreme. They were saying what I thought they would say, but there was so
Mm-hmm.
far fewer of those people. And I didn't let those people speak for the entire community because I couldn't. It was only like 5%, maybe even less.
I'm so First and foremost, thank you for sharing, for sharing this, because I think this, delves into what so many artists bring to the table, which is their point of view, the traumas that they've experienced, the joys and triumphs that they've experienced. But as you said, there can sometimes be an overemphasis in our memories on the negative experiences that we've had. But I think in hearing this story, it's really interesting, and it makes me think there's one of my favorite, sort of James Baldwin pieces is The Artist's
Mm.
Search for Integrity. And he talks about the idea that it's like more than politicians, more than clergy people, more than sort of anyone else. Artists reflect for so many people what it is to be alive, the unique experience of what it is to be a human being, and the fact that what it requires is you have to give of yourself. And in a world in which there is, again, so much negativity that exists, especially in online spaces, the topic of race within America, is such a third rail. And that's just, if you're coming from, one background as opposed to, multiple. I really admire, the bravery that it took, to take that step out on your own. And to hear, in some ways you're like, I had to do this because I had these feelings inside of me and I had to get them out. I salute you for that. And thank you for sharing this experience. And I'm curious as to when you started leaning a bit more, into your identity, as, a Chinese person, as a Black and Chinese person. How did that feel for you artistically? Were there any doors that opened up, any insights about yourself? Did you feel in some ways like this was the truest version of yourself that you would present it to the world? I'm just curious as to like how it felt going through, in some ways, this rebirth or this renaissance.
It's complicated, man. It's so thanks for that, man. That felt great. um,
This is a therapy session, really, in
yeah, right.
reality.
Like, I think, well, first I'll say this, that oftentimes when race is brought up, people think they're entering into a immediately polarized conversation. But for me, it's not that. For me, I'm like, yeah, I'm Black and Chinese, but that doesn't necessarily define my entire being. I just really love leaning into my culture and embracing the people of my culture and embracing, my heritage. And whether that's like the food that I eat, the language that I speak, the way that I speak the language, I love it all. And it's based in pride and joy. It's not based in like, well, I do this and y'all do that, and this is better than that. I don't do any of that. So it's just funny to me when sometimes people will engage with me about race and I will not meet their animosity back. I will not meet the comparisons that they want to make back because I'm just like, oh, y'all do that? That's cool. Tell me more about that. They're like, wait, this is not supposed to happen. You're supposed to say that like I suck and my culture sucks and that it's bad and that I'm an oppressor. I'm like, I don't ascribe to that. Like, do you believe that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think on my artistic journey too, I've ran against that in myself. Am I relying on this identity to almost like, am I basically doing the same thing I was doing before for validation, right? And I have to always question myself, am I leaning into this identity because I feel weak without it? Can I just be myself on stage? Can I just get up there? Yeah, I'm Black and Chinese and I love that, but that's not all of who I am. But if we're in a space where like, it's supportive and you can talk about that, and I'll do it, not as a crutch. I'll do it because, I love it. And I'm not delusional. Like, I know when people see me, they don't immediately expect me to understand so much about Asian culture, but I do. And so I'm aware of that. So I don't get mad if people, it takes them a little time to get used to the fact that like I know so much or that I can speak the language pretty good. So yeah, on the journey, it's been a lot of that. It's been a lot of basically the journey has been understanding that the external actually has no control over the internal unless I let it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Mm. That's a bar.
That's a bar. That's a bar. Okay, so you work in film, you work in TV, you work in social media as well. I'm just like curious, in your lifetime, like what are some of the changes that you've seen sort of happen? Whether it's like in your community, people perceiving how people are represented in either
Yeah.
Black or Asian communities or
Yeah.
film. What's that sort of been for you in that sort of journey?
I see a lot of changes and I think it has a lot to do with social media because it gave people, just everyday people, an outlet to express their opinion in a big, bold way. And it made people have to listen, and not, it made studios have to listen. The people who are making the movies, people who are funding the movies, right? Because if the people don't enjoy it, then they know they're not going to make money, and they can't keep pushing forth a product that the people don't actually agree with. And so I think that has helped us a lot to in these iterations, these most recent iterations of cultural representation, to be accurate, because they will get roasted on Twitter, they will get roasted on Instagram, TikTok, and it's immediate. I post almost every day. Like, you get instant. I try not to read my comments, but sometimes I do. You get instant feedback, and it actually can be a plus, because you're like, okay, actually, these people do like what I'm talking about, and there is an audience for this. That can be, you can get carried away with that, because you can lean on, very sensational and hate-filled stuff that can actually get a response, but that's not sort of what I'm talking about. But going back to what I was saying, the cultural representation has been, I think, getting better and better, because the people of that culture are saying, like, I didn't actually vibe with this. This is not an accurate representation of who I am. And there was a huge Disney remake that happened a few years ago. I'm not gonna name it,
Mm-hmm.
but it had something to do with my culture, the Asian side
Okay.
of me.
The Asian side.
And it
Mm-hmm.
was very much not a representation of my people, of the culture. It was more so, I felt, kind of a pandering to a country that they wanted to make money from. And nobody of my culture was a director, writer, producer of that, or writer. What? Not even a writer of that culture. So I think that was so happy when it didn't do well, because it taught them, like, oh, we can't do that. Actually, that's not actually a model for success. And so actually, it's probably a net positive that happened, so that we can get the everything everywhere all at once, and we can get more accurate, culturally accurate representations. And the thing I liked about Everything Everywhere All at Once is that it was a human story, just happened to be Chinese people and a Chinese immigrant story, but it didn't sort of lean on that as almost like a feel sorry for us kind of thing. It's just like, no, we're proud to be this. This is our experience. Here's our story.
I love the point that you make about, being in this age of social media, being in this age of, near immediate audience feedback, and just how that has changed the cycle of how things are made, in our industry. I go back and I think about, if y'all remember when they released the first images from the Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
Oh yeah.
And the internet went crazy. They're like, this is a monstrosity. Why does Sonic look like this? Why he's got these crazy teeth? Like, I would never want to see this. This is nightmare fuel. And at that point, this idea of this backlash, coming, and then, Paramount was like, we're going to do a whole character redesign. And they pushed the release date of the film. They went back and did that work. And I'm like, okay, if we can generate that energy for an animated character, what does that look like when it is, real life people? And I think, things that are drawn from real cultural experiences. So it also makes me think about the backlash. There was that Lionsgate movie, Gods of Egypt, which I think was 2011. And you've got a majority white British cast is playing the gods of Egypt. And you're like, this doesn't track. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And, to the point, what I loved is there was so much chatter and there was so much upheaval that the director came out and apologized and was like, I missed the mark here. Now, again, we know that our industry is slow to change. We know that there is a lack of cultural humility that exists at many of the people who are at the decision-making table. But I do think it is really interesting the ways in which consumers have more power than ever to voice their opinions and make their points of view known. And I feel like I saw this recently, within the Black community, where there is the Netflix show which is coming out, and it is an animated remake of, a very popular and beloved TV show from the 70s. And I don't have any compunctions. It's discourse. It's the animated remake of Good Times. And the trailer dropped for this project. And to see the reaction, particularly within Black Twitter, was fascinating, because you have people from the targeted community, people who ostensibly this is made for, being able to chime in and be like, this ain't it. This ain't it. Like, what is this? This doesn't sit right with me. And again, I think in some ways it's like, it is difficult to judge an entire project based on a 2-minute trailer. But also, you can watch a trailer, it's marketing materials that our industry generates, and have a sense of like, am I into that or not? And when you see characters that look like you, and the majority of your life you have grown up not seeing many of them, not seeing your culture represented, you're sensitive to the thing.
Absolutely.
So I love the ways in which I think so much used to be dictated top down, in the industry, being like, here's what you're going to get. It's like, yeah, you're going to get, Mickey Rooney and Yellowface and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Like, that's what y'all get. We don't care what you think. Take it. And now there's this moment where it's like, we get to talk back, and we get to vote with our time, and we get to vote with our dollars. And so I share your feeling of like, yes, sometimes like I don't wish ill on anyone's project, but also if your creative team has not done the due diligence to invite and involve stakeholders from the represented communities, you get what's coming to you.
Absolutely.
Yep. I'm all yep.
I love how professional you were, like, yeah, by saying that. You could have said that in a very different way, but you said it that way.
Yes.
Keep it civilized.
Yeah. I know. Well, like a couple, or I don't know if anyone listened to the podcast that we had that was released last December that Ashley Eakin did. She's my friend who is a person with disability, a filmmaker with disability, and she was talking about The Witches and the remake of that with like Anne Hathaway playing the head witch, and her hands are deformed, and that's supposed to be represented as scary, but for my friend Ashley, like, she has a rare bone disease, and that was a very sensitive way to depict someone who is scary, and like the disability community rallied against that depiction, and Anne Hathaway did issue an apology, and that was a huge deal for how you look at, or how we portray people who might have a, like, isn't completely able-bodied. So I think that was like a really interesting learning lesson, just to see when people do rally against it and people say something, it does actually affect maybe how Hollywood can keep on moving forward, because they don't want to be represented badly. They didn't realize their mistake till afterwards, unfortunately, but sometimes you have to show them. Otherwise, that is one benefit of social media, I will say, for sure. Yeah. We're able to speak on that. Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing is like, I think we have to teach the industry, because, Ryan, as you said, it's like, this is a business. The bottom line is the main concern. But I think if we can draw a line as advocates and interested parties and be like, your bottom line is going to be affected if you don't take the right steps. We're not going to settle for this anymore. I would rather not see a thing than see a thing that makes a mockery of my culture, that doesn't have anyone, from my community, that is involved in the process.
Yeah.
It made me think about this, the idea of, well, maybe I'll ask this as a question. What do you feel is the responsibility, of those of us who are filmmakers and storytellers who come from historically underrepresented backgrounds? And, there is this constant debate, of, do I have to tell stories about my community? Can I tell stories as a human being? Like, where do you come out on this debate or this question of, what we have to deal with as those who come from historically underrepresented backgrounds, and the weight that's sometimes put on us to speak for our community all the time or represent, and none of our communities are a monolith. So inherently there is a depersonalization, and it's like, all right, you've got the mic. Tell us what it's like for your community. Like, I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for me,
right,
but
for me. Yeah.
I'll say I'll say this. I'll say assimilation is a powerful drug. It's a very, very powerful drug. And people will give into that so easily just for a shot. And they'll forget everything that they learned about themselves and who they are and their culture and their people and their family in order for a shot at something.
Wow.
And they will sort of completely acquiesce in order to give what they think the system wants from them. And we've seen the results of what that looks like and the product of what that looks like. And I think the sad fact is that a lot of people don't know who they are. And a lot of people don't even know when they decide to acquiesce and assimilate that they're actually doing that. They think that they have this opportunity, so they're going to do it to the best of their capability, but with none of their sort of personal creativity involved, their personal background and story involved. I'm not interested in that. And I'm not interested in doing that. And I'm not interested in seeing that.
Put a full stop on that.
You talked about kind of that assimilation, and I guess I'm curious, like when you think about like the reality of intersectionality in like the execution of it in film and TV, who someone is like, can see different sides of the coin, so to speak. Like, how do you perceive that? How do you take some of that in? I don't know, because I feel like maybe in a way people maybe have to like sometimes rely on you to teach them, and that's kind of like an unfair disadvantage already as someone who
I used to be floating around like social media a lot, like it's not my job to teach you, and I do get that, but like if it's fun for me, then I'm gonna do it. You know what I mean? Like it's not a black and white thing. Oh, this person wants me to teach me. Are they gonna pay me? Then I'm not doing it. It's not like that. It's just like, do I vibe with this person, or do I vibe with this corporation or this conglomerate? And then are they paying me? Because then it's like, then that's a job.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is like, are you being yourself? Are you sort of acting in accordance to your core, your cultural core, or are you giving in to sort of, like I said, assimilation is a powerful drug. I'll say this because I grew up in a conservative environment where no one looked like me, and it was, the demographic was white and Asian, and the social class was like upper middle to very upper class. And so I experienced a lot of feeling like I had to, just for social survival, act in accordance to how they saw me, not act into accordance of like who I was. And I felt like I couldn't spend time trying to figure out who I was, because then I'd be alone and there's no one to actually bounce ideas off of, And so I know what it feels now going all the way to this side of like acting from my core. And if someone's telling me I need to act a certain way, I'll be like, who are you to tell me I need to act a certain way? No matter who you are, if you're black, Chinese, even if you're black and Chinese like me, if you're telling me I need to act a certain way, you're crazy.
Yeah.
That's insane. How are you going to tell me I need to act a certain way? And so I think the most important thing is intention. The most important thing is intention when someone asks you to sort of teach them. Do they just want you? Do they just want a stamp? You know what I mean? Well, this guy told me this, so I'm just going to do this. They don't actually explore. They don't actually find a deeper meaning. They don't actually try to find out what that means to them. Or are they trying to persuade you that they're right? These are conversations I do not want to have. And it's up to me. I can leave whenever I want. It's actually never a stressful situation for me, because I'm like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. Let me exit this situation politely.
But do you feel like that happens like in your career in film and TV? Like, does that kind of situation ever happen? Or
that's a more trickier situation, I think.
Exactly, right? Because it's like you're
yeah. It starts also like when you decide to agree to do the role. Like, a lot of power isn't just saying no and then finding, a way to politely say that you decline this, and not give any animosity towards it.
Well, what's an example? Like, did you like what's an example of a role that you turned down because you didn't feel like it was right? Without
I don't
naming.
want to get. I'm not trying to get canceled or never work at this
No,
time.
of course not. No, you don't have to name any person or even the project name, obviously. Just maybe like kind of what the parameters might have been.
Man, it's tricky because it's like, as an actor, you're supposed to be able to inhabit different roles, right? And how do I say this? Like, it's tricky because there's so many factors. There's like, you can't really control how the public's gonna sort of deem whether what you're doing is okay or not if you're portraying something outside of your culture, even though you look like the culture. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that's another thing. You know, if it's something that is based in religion that I'm not a part of, or something that is based in a culture that I'm not a part of, say it's like Puerto Rican, you know, or it's Dominican, even Jamaican. Where's that line? Because honestly, for me, it's my line is way different than I think necessarily the public's line is. And sometimes those don't match, because sometimes as an actor you can dive into a culture and really embody it and know that you're doing like the greatest representation that you can do because you studied it and you know it like the back of your hand and you've experienced it. You've gone to the country, you spent time with them, you already look like them. And then you could still get canceled because they say that you're not a part of that culture. And what I think I've seen is that historically that has not been the case for a lot of people who are of the lighter complexion. You know, a lot of white actors and actresses have done that and walked away unscathed. So it's like, it's just funny to me that the ramifications are so strong now on people of color as well. And so I have turned down those kind of roles because I'm just like, am I? It's a question. It's really a question. It's not really a hardcore answer. I'm just like,
Sure.
not even am I allowed, but you know, is that something that is? Can I do that in a respectful way? Can I do justice to that representation or that culture in a way that actually is? Because I'm always thinking about that, you know. But I also don't want to be sort of pigeonholed into just being a Black and Chinese man.
Of course. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'd say it's something that hasn't been figured out. Maybe it never will be. And I think we're at the height of, maybe we're not at the height. I think we're coming down off the height of like people being so stringently attached to identity that they don't even let people that aren't a part of that identity play that identity. Because there's way more of a gray area than I think has been allowed recently.
It's a lot more complicated, and that's why we're talking about the complexities of intersectionality, because that's, you know, the things that we have to think about now or reckon with as like society is kind of like not quite in like a post woke era, you know?
Yeah, I want to say this too. Like I think I'll say this. There is a reason why Robert Downey Jr. playing a black man in Tropic Thunder, he was not canceled for that. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And I don't think that people are ready for that conversation, you know, because there's a nuance. It is a character within a character within a character in a movie that's in a movie. And it wasn't portrayed, it was portrayed as a character that was human, but also sort of like also a joke. And we were all in it together.
Yes.
And I think that's something that like is kind of lost in this sort of kerfuffle era that we're in, is like, we're not allowing for nuance. We're relying on headlines to tell us the whole story when we don't even actually dive into the whole story and the nuance. So yeah.
Bro, I love the fact that you brought up Robert Downey Jr. in that role. Like I still will hold, and it's like, It's like, my background is like, I'm a black man. I am a student. I studied African American studies and film theory in college. Like, I wrote
Yeah.
my thesis about, depicting interracial relationships in Hollywood films and the business model of that. And,
Mhm.
the ways in which our industry doesn't necessarily have an ideology of its own, but it's about making money. And, well acquainted with the history of blackface, well acquainted with the history of yellowface, well acquainted with all of those things.
Yeah.
It's one of the deftest uses of comedy in terms of sort of poking a hole and investigating that. Like, that's one of my favorite Robert Downey Jr. roles.
Hmm.
I quote it at least once a month.
Me too.
It is. I think it's a brilliant thing, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's like you go into it and you're like, wait a minute, like, how do I feel about this? Like, this man is clearly in blackface. But it's
Hmm.
like, oh wait, who is the joke? And it's this idea. It's like in comedy, you can be punching up or you can be punching down,
Yeah.
and the root of so much great comedy is punching up. And so it's the question of like,
Yes.
who's the butt of the joke in that? It's Kirk
Yeah.
Lazarus, this absurd
Yes.
Australian actor who is playing a role. It's like that's the joke. And I think the nuance
Yes.
that Robert Downey Jr. brought to that role, but even, in his interactions with Brandon T. Jackson, who
Mhm.
is a black actor, and he's like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Like, the conversation was had in the film. And at
Yeah.
no point did I feel like what Robert Downey Jr. was doing with that role and that character was about making fun of black people.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a very fine line and it's a very distinct thing, but I love that you brought that up just because I think there's a way to do it. You've just got to be really smart. Like, you've
Yes.
got to be mindful and you've got to be aware. And it's like, I'm of the mindset, like, I'm a huge comedy fan. I'm for pushing boundaries. I'm for making people uncomfortable. But it's also this idea of like, are you punching up or are you punching down?
Exactly. And I think RDJ approached that role from a human perspective and from an awareness of knowing that the blackface is not the joke. The black person he's portraying is not the joke. His character is the joke, but he's also not playing his character as a joke. He's playing a character, he's playing an actor who's fully invested in creating like a very real character. And so he created this black man that was actually very real to him. And he's playing it real. The joke is how everyone else is receiving it, and the fact that like it's a character within a character.
Yeah.
And I feel like that there can be like a whole dissertation written on the complexity of that and why
Mhm.
black people love that role and quote it like every day. I quote that with my brother almost every time I see him. And we don't find anything sort of wrong with it. Black Twitter has never attacked it, you know? And Black Twitter can be very sensitive
Oh,
about a
yeah.
lot of things.
Oh, and Black Twitter keeps receipts. Black Twitter will
Yeah.
remember.
If you
Black Twitter will be
survive
like,
Black Twitter,
he really
Yeah.
did. Perhaps his greatest performance, just for what a tightwire that is.
Exactly.
I never called him RDJ before, but I love that. And I
Mhm.
now have to watch the movie. You guys, I have not watched Tropic Thunder. I'm
Wow,
so
you
sorry.
they have some maybe some Asian stereotypes in there
Mhm.
Oh no.
that aren't so great.
It's
They
not
aren't so great.
It's
Not so
no.
great. Okay.
And
yeah.
I think with there are some things in that movie that do not work. And have not
For sure.
and have not held up well.
Yeah.
But to watch it in particular for that, it's like, okay, there's a degree of thoughtfulness and intentionality that I appreciated.
Mhm.
And again, it's like growing up and seeing in so many ways how characters of color have been made the butt of the joke. It did feel refreshing, at least within that character and that frame of like, oh, you did something right here. And again, I think it would be interesting because I haven't seen that movie in a number of years, but it's in the ways in which it's also a send up of how absurd our industry is.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we like to make these big progressive claims and say, we're leading this, and the way in which Hollywood has been villainized as pushing this agenda and going woke and this and that, I'm like, has it? Isn't
Yeah.
that's not necessarily my day-to-day experience. I don't know where that's coming from, but okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's always a trend first, and then they learn the hard way, and then it gets better. I think that always happens, actually. Because
yeah.
here's the thing about Hollywood and the industry is that like until people at the very top, the people who are greenlighting these projects, the C-suite executives that actually have the final say, until there's diversity there, then they're always going to learn the hard way first.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're armed now with social media, I'm going to stay civilized. I'm not going to refer back to how Andrew phrased it. Now that we have the power to vote with our dollars and our attention, things will have to change, because once you mess with people's money, then they have to sort of re-articulate and restructure how they present that culture when it's not accurate.
Mm-hmm. Let's do our call to action section. Yeah. I feel like you actually presented some ideas and a lot of good ways that we can foster change and how to come up with more solutions in the future, which you just kind of said. But I do think in terms of our podcast, we always like leave everyone with an action plan. You know, some people are kind of on a grassroots level. Some people have real power that are listening to this podcast. What do you feel like are real actionable things that people can do for change in maybe representing intersectionality better in an industry, better in media?
Actually experience the culture for themselves, as a like with other people who are part of that culture. Go into those communities. I think also, if you live in LA, it's actually very easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't do it for the pat on the back. You don't do it to feel good about yourself. You do it out of genuine curiosity and inquisitiveness, right? To understand, like, oh wow, they do that this way. And also kind of relate it back to how you do your certain things. And it's not better or worse. It's just like, wow, like I never thought of this kind of thing from this perspective. You know, my favorite conversations are when, you know, the group of people is diverse, or maybe the group of people aren't diverse, but they have a diverse way of thinking. You know, they don't settle on entitlement or sort of like cultural supremacy. You know, they're always willing to be open to another person's perspective, and also to stand strong when they feel like their perspective is being attacked. But they don't have to meet it back with hate and animosity. They can meet it back with, actually, you know, I disagree, because I think my culture is actually amazing, and I don't think like yours is better or worse. It's just different. But also a call to action is like, take a deep breath, meditate. There's a reason why why certain people think their culture is better. It's because they're insecure, because they're not actually whole in and of themselves. Because if you are, you're not going to attack somebody else. You're not going to think you're better or worse than somebody else. So a lot of this stems from not even culture, but just, are you cool with who you are? Take a second to be proud of yourself and love yourself, and then let that energy emanate into the world. Not the, I feel like I'm not whole. I feel like I haven't done enough in my life. I feel like I don't have enough money. I feel like people don't respect me. Do you respect yourself? Find that and let that emanate out. And I think when people do that, they'll realize, like, damn, like I ain't got no beef with nobody. And I love just to experience all different kinds of cultures and different kinds of people, because I love myself. You know, if I love myself, I can love other people. If I can serve myself in an unselfish way, in an unegotistical way, then serving myself as a human, I'm already serving other people and their humanity too. Because if I can realize my own humanity, I can see it in other people. I think when people have that realization, it's just funny, because they realize, like, damn, I've been carrying all this hate and animosity towards like a projection, something that I projected that was inside onto somebody else, onto a culture, onto a movement, onto a conglomerate, onto, you know, a person of a different race. And so if there's an actionable item, it's that. Find out where that sort of, that tenseness, that sort of unsurety, that insecurity is coming from, because it's not coming from outside of you. It's coming from within you. So find that, try to cure that, try to be at peace with that. Then you'll see sunshine and rainbows, you know? And then when you don't see the sunshine and rainbows, you won't be so sad, because you're like, sunshine and rainbows still exist, even though I don't see them right now in front of me.
See, I said this was like a therapy session.
For real.
People need to hear that. Yeah. But I like what you said about people inserting themselves and checking out different spaces. I love that
Yeah.
because I do love going to like different kind of like cultural events, or just even in the industry, there's a lot of different organizations. Like obviously there's like CAPE and there's NOLIP and other things like that. And it is cool to like when I in DGA, there's like different groups. There's an Asian American committee, there's the African American committee. There's different places where people can go and express their views and try to change things within the infrastructure of the organization. It is really great when I go to a Asian American committee meeting and there's like white guys in there, and they care. They want to understand. They want to see that. They want to hear people's points of views, or even just meet people in the community. That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Or when I'm in the women's steering committee, there's lots of men that come by, like I just think that's so cool. I don't think there's enough of that though. There's not a lot of that.
I think,
And
yes.
people are afraid to step in those.
Exactly. I feel like people are afraid when they don't actually need to be. And I think their fear, when they bring that into those spaces with them, people react to that. And so they think that it's the outside reacting to who they are, but like it's actually them showing that fear and being afraid and fearful of what a reaction might be, and sort of like people outside of them being like, that guy seems like he's afraid or weird or something. But as that person, they think that the outside is the problem. But if you come in and you're relaxed and you're like, I'm just here to learn, I don't really necessarily want to center myself or not center myself. I just want to be here and learn. Like you could be in any situation. I went to an Iranian restaurant with another non-Iranian, and I remember being in that situation. I'm like, I'm kind of uncomfortable right now because I don't know anything. I don't even know any dishes on this menu.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sort of like look around and think that everyone's looking at me like I don't fit in, or I could look around and smile and be like, hey, yeah, I don't really know anything here, but like, how are you guys doing? And when the waiter comes, like, hey, I actually don't know anything, but I'm very interested to try like what you think is the best dish. It's all about how you respond to the interaction. It has nothing to do with the outside most of the time. I mean, if I was like in Alabama and they're burning a cross and I just wandered in, that's a little different. So I will say that there's lines. There's lines. You know what I mean? Where you cannot actually persuade or act any different because they're just going to hate you. But 99% of the time, that's not the case.
It's the thing that's really interesting, and I think echoing Tiffany's point is what you said about the importance of storytellers, filmmakers, creators, writers to understand the communities that they're talking about, that they're portraying, in this idea of, in some ways it's the cultural humility, Tiffany, that you talked about, of like showing up in a place where it's not necessarily your group, but you're there to learn. And that posture of openness, that posture of, there are some things that I can learn from y'all, and there's some things that I might be able to share with you. But I think it's like you see behind the scenes footage of, actors doing all of this fight training, or doing firearms training, or, whatever their character is supposed to be doing. But it's like, I wonder how much thought goes into, well, if we're going to be in this community, we need to learn this community. We need to have stakeholders. We need to have people who can help us see and understand the things that we don't know. And I think we're seeing more of it than Hollywood of the past, but I still think there's a lot of room and there's a lot of work, to do there. And so it's again, I really like, Ryan, how you've centered it is, it's about the mindset that we bring into these conversations. And like, look, it's a natural human instinct to be uncomfortable if you are in a space with a bunch of people who are not like you. I think the thing is, most of us have grown up in environments. Most of us who are people of color, or who, come from different backgrounds, work in industries, have grown up in places where that's our default. And we understand how to navigate that. Like, I have had to, from a very young age, be comfortable with walking into a room that is 97% white. And I got to figure it out. That was middle school. That was high school. That was college. That was all of those things. I think it can be difficult sometimes if you have operated in the safety and the comfort of being in the majority, and then to challenge yourself to the experience. And it's often a passing experience, but the passing experience of being a minority, of being the only one in the room. And like, I encourage, like, for any of our listeners who come, from a background in which most of their life they have been in the majority and they've been surrounded by people with themselves, I'm like, hey, understand that it can be scary. But like, there is so much that you can gain and there is so much that you can learn. And especially as an artist, it will make you a better artist.
Absolutely.
Like, the more perspectives that you have to grapple with and that you have to think about. And I think, Ryan, even your perspective growing up of, well, how do I hold these two identities true? Like, both are me. But to understand in some ways that you have a point of view that most people don't have. And I think it can be a secret weapon in your storytelling. And I wish more storytellers who come from white backgrounds, particularly in this American context, would find the space to explore that tension and that uncomfortability. Because then I think the more that you are aware of how many different points of view there are, the better you can be in making your very specific story universal. And I think that's the key of art that connects. Is I'm going to watch a film, I'm going to watch a TV show, I'm going to read a book from a perspective of someone who has a completely different life than mine. And in that, I'm going to be able to draw and be like, oh, well, they're worried about death too. Oh, they're grieving. Oh, they're mourning. Oh, they find joy in these accomplishments. Oh, these are the things that they're scared of. And it's like, again, going back to, the James Baldwin piece that I referenced, earlier, what are we doing as artists if we are not plumbing the depths of humanity? Yeah. And I understand how in the white supremacist construct of how this country was built, plumbing the depths of humanity in the history of our industry has been, what's going on with these straight white men? What's happening with y'all? Like, you're the focus. And I'm like, there's a lot of other ways. Like,
yeah. Oh my God, there's so much I could say from what you just said. I agree with all of it, and I will say for people to be aware of when they start to become their enemy, right? I think everybody sort of, once they realize, like, damn, I've been prioritizing Eurocentrism my whole life. The tendency is to swing the complete opposite way, right? Instead of to find the balance and being like, oh wait, I didn't know my full humanity and I have to figure that out, but I'm not going to think that the people who I felt did that to me are not human, because that necessarily wasn't their intention. They've just been living in a society that was literally structured for them to be the center of it. And does that make them inherently evil? I don't think so. And to think that would make them become an enemy. And so now you have a crutch of an enemy to fight against that furthers the process of you not understanding yourself and your own happiness and your pride and joy. Do you know what I'm saying? That is not sustainable. And I've seen that because, we have BLM was here and when Trayvon Martin died, and then it went away and then it came back. You know what I mean? It's like, are you going to ride those waves, or are you going to figure out your humanity and love yourself for who you are? Or are you going to wait for the trend to come so that you can spew your hate without consequences because the trend is there? The trend will die. Yeah. It always does. Like, can you be at the height of when you actually, have permission to be angry and loud and sometimes very wrong and inhuman? Or are you going to figure who you are out so that you can meet everybody's humanity, even at times of very, very high animosity? Because contributing to hate on any side, I'm not playing devil's advocate, I'm saying any side, is never the answer. And it never actually feeds your soul or your creativity. It only adds more animosity and hate into the world, which creates more violence. It makes things, I don't know why I'm laughing. It makes things way worse for not just you, but everybody. And you can't create from that place of being absolutely just upset and angry. I feel like the best art that I see is like at times, at those heights of, anger and animosity, the people who find pride and joy in who they are and share that. And it stems from love, and pride in who you are, not sort of like pride in attacking your attacker. or pride in attacking your enemy. It's like the enemy is usually an ideology that has hijacked humans. It's not the human itself.
Well said.
Well
Well
said.
said.
So, last philosophical wrap up for this episode. Do you have? Let's go from that and end on an inspiring thought on our topic today.
Man, I have a lot of positive thoughts. I just think that it is getting a lot better. I think that social media has given so many people a platform to express themselves artistically. And I think the only thing that is holding more people back is the fear of how it's going to be perceived, because they've never shown that side of them before. But I think what's interesting is, like, I won't say the fear isn't real. It is, but it's based in something that's not real, if that makes sense. It's based in a fear, or it's based in what you think people are going to say, and that does not exist yet before you make it. So I would encourage people to create the thing even though they think that it's going to be received negatively, because it hasn't been created. Therefore, it hasn't been received negatively yet. And it could be the complete opposite of what they think, right? It could be received absolutely positively. And it could change and accelerate the inclusivity and the diversity and the accuracy, the cultural accuracy that we're experiencing now. You know, their seemingly little creative thing that they're afraid to put out there can actually make us hit a J curve in sort of allowing everyone to see either their specific culture's humanity or our humanity in general. So don't be afraid, I feel like, of something that doesn't exist. That's my advice.
Beautiful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
you.
Brian. We really appreciate you being on our episode and imparting your unique perspective. And yeah, we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yes. Thank you guys. You guys are great. Thank you for this therapy session. It was amazing.
Yes. Go therapy. All right. So our website is filmphilosophy.com. That's film and then philosophy with an F.com. We have educational resources on there. We also have a contact info. Our email is filmphilosophy.tme@gmail.com. Feel free to ask any questions or follow up with us. Thank you so much again, everyone, for listening. We had so much fun with this topic that we kept talking after we wrapped the episode. So please enjoy some bonus content from our chat. You can find it again on our website, filmphilosophy.com. That's film and then philosophy with an F.com. This is Film Philosophy, and we'll see you next time.